Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube show called Eat Fish Because You Want To, Not Because You Have To. We're here with my friend Laurel, who is one of the teaching pastors in our network of churches. So she rolls around in Mercy Hill like once every 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
And you're teaching in this series, and so you're eating fish with me.
I am. I spent the first 21 years of my life Catholic, went to Catholic schools, Holy Communion. The majority of my family are still Catholics.
So we have learned that the fish sandwich is a Catholic thing.
Yeah, largely. We just ate a lot of filet of fish.
On Fridays?
On Fridays.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And
During
fish
Lent.
fries. Oh, yeah. And there'd be fish fries. And then depending on the communities, like the Polish communities and others, depending on just how steep they were in tradition, like you'd have entire fish fries. And other people would come, like even who weren't Catholics, they would come to the church particularly to buy fish dinners. Because my parents were like, we got 5 kids, we're gonna go to McDonald's to do the filet
Yeah.
fish.
Okay.
But yeah, we ate a lot of fish on Fridays.
Okay.
It was always kind of a Lenten tradition.
So what's your relationship to fish now, fish sandwiches?
I love fish, but nobody else in my family really likes it.
Okay.
Like my kids will eat cod,
Sure.
like if we dip it in butter, but
Yeah.
nobody likes salmon, nobody likes trout,
But you
except
do.
for me. Oh yeah,
Okay.
I like it.
Okay, so this is my favorite restaurant, McCormick's in Wayzata. I saved it for you
Thank
because
you,
we're
Drew.
pals. I have the walleye and the grouper. They're both fantastic.
Oh,
And I
okay.
will let you pick which one you want.
It's right in front of me. I'm doing the
All right,
grouper.
perfect. So
Ooh, and we get fries too.
you get fries. I have sweet potato chips, I think is what I've got here. And
A good fry is always an essential part.
are you a mayonnaise with fries person? Like, are you French like that?
I am not. I've always just been a pure ketchup person, but ketchup is necessary.
Color
Ooh, this
red,
looks
right?
good. Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's my favorite. I love the grouper
Oh.
sandwich. It's not breaded.
It's not breaded. The Culver's one was pretty breaded, right?
Very breaded, yeah.
Oh.
This is surprisingly crisp too.
Yeah. This got a nice crunch
Given
in the
how thinly
exterior.
breaded it is.
Yes,
I mean, I already told you this is my favorite, so I'm like.
it is delish.
So was Lent ever like a negative thing for you?
No, it feels to me like it just kind of piled in with everything else. You know, like there were things that we did around certain times of year. Like around Lent, we would always do the 3 purple candles and the 1 pink candle. So purple and pink were kind of these signs of these images of holiness, and so kind of biblical colors. And so there was always 3 purple candles, I believe, and 1 pink one, and we'd light one for every week of Lent.
Okay.
And then there would be liturgical readings that we would do at church and as a family. Honestly, growing up, it felt a bit more intimate than most of the other things that we did,
Oh,
because
cool.
it felt like there was actually a tradition that we could bring into our home and do just as our family. We saw the repetition of that as well in the church. So they would usually have a wreath and then they would have larger candles. But it felt as though we could actually make the tradition come into our home, because in the seasons that I was growing up Catholic, everything was very much driven by the church, and going to a Catholic school, then the things kind of happened there, but it didn't seem like there was a translation into our home as a person in terms of a personal application. Like, what does this mean in terms of making us a tighter family? Or what does this mean in terms of giving things up? Or what does this mean in terms of how we act as siblings? In fact, I love Lent in this season more than Advent.
Okay. Because of its connection to your actual home and your memories.
Yeah, and holiness. Like the Christmas season and the Advent season seemed like it was more co-opted by the culture than Easter was.
Yeah.
Because even though there was kind of the Easter bunny and that kind of stuff, there was a sense of holiness and a death to self that for us would start with Ash Wednesday. And Ash Wednesday was always this solemn time where we'd have to meditate on, what does it mean? From ashes you come and dust you shall return.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it helped us to focus on the frailty of our own human lives and like count the cost of your life. You're not promised forever. And then knowing kind of the sacrifice of Jesus. And then we had the lineups that we would watch, right? Jesus of Nazareth would come on, and like, I don't know why Jesus was British with blue eyes and like
That was a show?
Yeah, Jesus of Nazareth came on every year on network television. So Ben-Hur would come on network television. The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston would come on every year. And it would always end with Jesus of Nazareth. But the Jesus guy was like, had these piercing blue eyes. He had really sunken in cheekbone, like really high cheekbones. And he had a British accent. And he would like peer into the camera.
Wow.
And you felt like he was staring at your
I think we can agree
your
that
soul.
Jesus is going to speak English. He's going to speak it with a British.
You're right, he's going to be British. Like, it wasn't Cockney or anything, but
Australian.
Right.
Todd Munger would like it to be Australian.
Right, Todd Munger would like that. But we would watch the lineups every year. I think the hardest thing for me growing up was more the imagery of Jesus.
Okay.
Because Jesus was always white.
Yeah.
God was always white. He looked like King Triton from The Little Mermaid. Gosh, for being in the Middle East, Jesus is awfully pale. Yeah. Like, if he hid out in Egypt, like,
we can tell you what that guy is.
Right? Like, he's the foreigner. Like, so I think for me, growing up as a kid of color in Minnesota who was Catholic, most other African Americans were Baptist or Church of God in Christ or African Methodist Episcopalian or something else. So the imagery that I grew up with, the iconography was always very inspired by Italy, by papal authority. And so Jesus was always very pale, very white. So was Mary, so were the angels. And so for me as a kid of color, I started to equate holiness with whiteness.
Yeah.
And for me, that was really problematic then in terms of its other attachments to those things. And so one of the things that I say to people is, look, if we're going to teach Jesus, teach him to be anthropologically honest. Like, don't create images of Jesus that make you feel good about you, but that's not who he was.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a generation right now who's like...
I think for most people that look like me, they should feel like Jesus looks less like themselves. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that I've observed, like, Jesus obviously wasn't Asian, but there are these cool, like in order to tell the story that, like, when Jesus is God with us as a human being, he's for you, they would depict Jesus, like the communion had, like, sushi and rice instead of a traditional Middle Eastern meal. And I think when you haven't been told that God is with you and for you, it can be helpful to see God the way that you see yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, some of us have seen there's a poster that has all of these images of Jesus from around the world.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite cool. And when I saw that, I thought, maybe that would have been helpful for me as a kid to see that other people other people have also imagined Jesus to be like them as well. And then you wrestle with the scriptures and Isaiah that's to tell us there's nothing comely or beautiful that would have drawn us to him. And so while we may say, well, he doesn't look like he was in the Sistine Chapel, he doesn't look like me either. And so, but as you said, as he's with us, what is it like for us to imagine Jesus walking among us and being so alongside of us that his imagery it takes on all of us?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I just think that's such an important thing in the want to instead of the have to. Yeah. Is to pursue the God who wants to be with you, he doesn't have to. Yes. Like the whole story of going up to Lent is God's want to, not his have to. And then if our response becomes this duty or this obligation, like, God doesn't need us. I think it was like a jarring thing to learn in my spiritual life, but just to go like, God isn't dependent on me, God doesn't need me. But then you go like, well, he's pursuing me because he wants to. He wants to be in a relationship with me. God likes me even though I'm messed up. Right, exactly. In fact, this morning I'm trying to read through the Bible in a year, and we were in Leviticus, and I was listening to all the requirements of the priests and all of the slaughtering of the animals and all of the, like, if you're going to bring an animal, it can't be crushed or it can't be blemished, all of these things. And I thought, oh my God, we're all those things. We're all crushed. We're all blemished. And you were made those things to be near to us because you wanted to be. And I think about that too, like as a kid, like we really focused on the New Testament. We didn't really know much about the Old Testament. And so now looking at all of the foreshadowing of Jesus and thinking about what a burden it was before the sacrifice of Christ. Right. I mean, can you imagine, while people might have been jealous of the Levitical priests, what it was like to have animal after animal after animal after animal to slaughter and to throw the blood on, all of those things. And I can understand why for a non-Christian it seems like, man, God was kind of barbaric and like, why did they have to do all of this stuff? Like, how do you love someone out of all that? That's what Jesus Christ came to deliver us from. He's actually the fulfillment of it. And so
How gracious of God that he told us in Hebrews, it's not the blood of lambs and goats.
Right.
It's not all the have-tos. It's not dragging ourselves before the altar because we have to. It's coming with open hands because we realize how much we've been saved from.
Yes.
And I know some churches, maybe some of us had experiences where we never were given that grace. And so we didn't make the translation between God loving us. Instead, we had this sense of he's disappointed.
Right.
For me, that's how I felt growing up, is there was always a fresco of Jesus on the ceiling of our grade school. And I always felt like it was like the eyes would follow us. And I always thought, I was like, oh, we were all so scared. Like, is Jesus really that big? And is he like going to step off the ceiling and like crush us with his anger? But that's kind of some of the things, unless we were taught the grace and the mercy and the love of God and being able to draw with intimacy, it's easy to slide into rules.
Right.
And honestly, some of us like the rules because we can control rules. We can't control the Holy Spirit.
Right.
So it's easy to be crabby about rules, but in a strange way, I think we kind of like them.
It tilts the power back to us.
It tilts the power back to us.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now we've got a lot to think about.
Yep.
What did you think about the sandwich?
I think it
is thumbs up, thumbs down. Your 2 thumbs up.
Two
Grouper
thumbs
sandwich,
up.
McCormick's.
Delicious.
Walleye sandwich, 2 thumbs up. Eat fish because you want to, not because you have to.
That's right.